ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930 present The Drive.
It is Monday, May 24th. Your drive begins now on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. I'm your host, Paul Swann. You can be a part of the program by calling the White Claw phone lines at 877-420-TALK. That is 877-420-8255. White Claw Hard Seltzer, it is made pure. Coming up today on the program, good friend of the show. He's been involved in sports throughout the years, and he, of course, if you have followed Chris Dickerson's career, he has written for many publications, including the Herald-Dispatch, the West Virginia Record. He's also the president of the School of Journalism and Mass Communications Alumni Advisory Board. And he's going to join us because the new inductees have been announced today. And there are a couple of sports figures, sports members of the media. Best way to probably put that is they have sports tendencies. We're going to talk to him about who those individuals are and why they are going to be inducted into the Hall of Fame. As I mentioned, your phone calls. You can also be a part of Twitter with me at Paul Swann. Looking forward to interacting with you there. So we'll go over all of that here in the next few minutes. But, of course, over the weekend, more, I don't want to say hardware, I just more accolades, more people recognizing that the champs reside in Huntington, West Virginia. The coaching staff, the Marshall coaching staff, soccer team, your world champion soccer squad, they were honored as the coaching staff of the year. The Thundering Herd receiving the United Soccer Coaches National Coaching Staff of the Year award. Of course, the Thundering Herd winning the national championship. So Chris Grassi and his squad have won that distinction and honor. And honestly, you take a program like Marshall, new on the scene as far as appearances in the NCAA tournament is concerned, new on the scene as far as how many times they have been able to make the tournament. They won their first match in the NCAA tournament the previous season, 2019, it feels like so long ago. Chris Grassi able to elevate this program to a contender in a relatively quick time and win a national championship. So the Thundering Herd winning or being honored as a coaching staff of the year. So that's great news for this program. And how many doors will this open up? I mean, honestly, Marshall was smart to lock him down, get him a contract befitting of a coach of a national championship team, a national championship caliber program, very befitting of him. It elevates the job, it elevates the position, it elevates the program. And honestly, again, you look back at the vision, Mike Hamrick. Mike Hamrick had the vision, put together a world-class soccer facility at the collegiate level and hire a good coach and be competitive in that space. So congratulations to Chris Grassi for having a vision, being able to come in and back it up. He said, look, we can win a national championship. I honestly believe you can. You can do that here in Huntington. You can do that with Marshall. You have the tools. You just need to put it all together now. And so coaching staff of the year, hopefully everybody's going to be well taken care of and you keep this machine going for many years to come. How cool would it be? Seriously, how cool would it be if Marshall wins multiple national championships over a long span here in soccer? Have Marshall be known as a soccer school. The fans seem to be into it. You got Marshall a lot of attention, and it's always positive for the Marshall Thundering Herd. It's good for me. I like it. So congratulations once again to Chris Grassi and his staff, as I'm sure the hard work has begun already trying to defend. That's the thing. That's the fun thing now. You're not hunting anymore. You're defending. You are the defending national champion. So every time you play a match, you got to bring your A game. Everybody's going to be looking to get you. Every conference member is going to be looking to take you down. They're all happy for you because it elevates Conference USA, but at the same time, they want to take you down, be the first national championship as a Conference USA team. First national champion. Did I understand that right? First national championship brought to Conference USA as an existing member. That's pretty cool right there. So I don't want to let the cat out of the bag just yet while Chris is coming on. we'll tell you in a minute. I tweeted it out earlier, so if you follow me on Twitter, you kind of already know. But I don't want to let it out just yet. I'm going to make you earn it here in a couple minutes. So Chris is going to come on here in the next few minutes. We're going to talk to him. And there are a couple individuals being honored for their contributions, and they're pretty good names. I know both of them. That's the cool thing. I know both of them, and I know that the nomination and the induction is well earned. So I'm pretty excited about that. Later on, we'll get your phone calls in, I promise. 877-420-TALK, 877-420-8255. But I think that's the game plan. We're just going to talk to Chris here in the next few minutes. You look at last year's class, and there's going to be a ceremony coming up to honor last year's class as well, because COVID was unfortunately a thing. And you look at some of the names that were on the class last year. My good friend Bill Bissett is on the list, a 1997 graduate of the master's program. As your current president and CEO of the Huntington Regional Chamber of Commerce. There's some big names on this list. And you look at what Marshall offers as a university, and sometimes you kind of wonder, what does Marshall really offer? Well, you see some of these names that are being brought up, and wow, you think, wow, that person, he did what? Oh, that's amazing. Same thing with soccer. Hopefully you get over this insecurity thing. I think Marshall sometimes as a fan base, sometimes in certain areas maybe doesn't give itself enough credit. So we'll turn our attention to what's happening on the honor list. A couple of sports figures being inducted. We'll talk about that when we continue here on today's edition of The Drive on ESPN 94.1 and AM 930.
We're taking Paul Swann everywhere. Download or subscribe to The Drive with Paul Swann on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.
You can take me anywhere you want to. Paul Swann, your host here for today's edition at ESPN 94.1 and AM 930. You can also listen to the program live. Just download the WRVC app. You can get it at our website, WRVC.com. Want to welcome to the program now. You've known him for years of sports coverage or his other journalistic works, but that's not the reason he's here today. He is the president of the School of Journalism and Mass Communications Alumni Advisory Board. He's Chris Dickerson. He messaged me on Friday. He said, okay, what time am I on the show? Because he has an open invite. And my first word was like, okay, what's the reason this time? Because I was like kind of curious what it was about. And so I've had to keep my mouth shut the entire weekend. I've known this since Friday. The release came out about 4 o'clock, so I'm free and clear to say whatever I want to say. The new class has been announced to the W. Pitt Page School of Journalism and Mass Communications Hall of Fame, and 2 important members of the Marshall media are involved. Steve Cotton, a legendary voice, and he's not even past his prime. He's not even hit his prime yet. A legendary voice among voices, calling herd games for years. And Mike Kirtner, the president of Kindred Communications and the person who signs my paychecks. So both these members will be inducted at a ceremony later on this year. Do you have an idea when that ceremony will be, or is that still up in the air?
It's not definite yet. We have a tentative date in October, but we still, with all the COVID protocols and everything going on, we're still trying to pin it down exactly and make sure there's no another new outbreak or anything that keeps people off campus in the fall, because we have it at the Student Center each year. So
okay,
we have a tentative date, and it's October 29th, but that's nothing definite yet. We'll have more details out on that when it's pinned down for sure.
So, Chris, let's talk a little bit about this, what this Hall of Fame's all about first before we get into the details of the 2 people that are most interesting to us. I mean, everyone's interesting, but for our purposes, Steve and Mike. Hall of Fame, it was established in the 80s, really hadn't heard much about it. And then several years ago, it felt like it became active again. So tell us a little bit more about what's the School of Journalism and Mass Communication is doing with this Hall of Fame.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. It started in 1985, and they were putting in the very important people, the people who won Pulitzers, and they were putting those people in first. And then back in it's probably the early 2000s, it kind of went dormant. They weren't inducting new people. then fast forward to 5 or 6 years ago, we kind of started this alumni advisory board again to try to help out the School of Journalism with, getting its name out in the public again in a better way, and to raise have fundraisers to help the school, for the faculty to go on trips, educational trips, and for the students to go on to trips. And then right after we started that back up, we said, well, let's just start this Hall of Fame back up and get it going again. And I think this is the 5th class that we have inducted since we kicked it back off again. And, it's another great class. In addition to Steve and Mike, a lot of people locally will know the name Jack Hoover, publisher of Huntington Quarterly magazine. Brent Cunningham, who went to Marshall when we did back in the late 1980s, and he worked with the Charleston Daily Mail for a few years after that. But he has just become a prolific writer. He's written for all sorts of prestigious publications and websites, and was the news director of the Columbia School of Journalism for a while, just done amazing things. And then Virginia Sherlock, who was very big in the Associated Press back in the early 1970s. And now she's an attorney in Florida. But what's really impressive is she was working on the AP News desk in the early 1970s when most women in newspaper journalism were relegated to working on the society page, or the women's pages, as they call them. But she was right there on the front lines and played a key role in some major things in the Associated Press style book that all journalists know, and it's our Bible, So she was very instrumental in journalism in the 1970s.
Chris Dickerson joining me. The two names that we are talking about specifically, Steve Cotton and Mike Kirtner. And as someone who I've talked to a lot of members of the media outside of Huntington, and I'll talk to radio announcers, people who cover the Beat and Conference USA throughout the years. And most of the times, anytime I have a conversation, if I'm setting up an interview, Steve Cotton's name comes up, and it's always positive. I don't think people realize he's well-liked and well-respected outside of just Huntington and the Marshall community. He is almost universally beloved by everyone I speak to. Either they know him and have admiration for him, or they really know him and love him well. And he has been calling Marshall games for a long time. And if you look at what makes Marshall sports such an important thing in the fabric of a lot of people's lives, sometimes it's listening to the radio guy call the games. I mean, he's the most important person in their lives, because if they can't watch the game, or if they can't be somewhere where they can actually be at the game, or they just can't see it, they always know they have Steve Cotton there. And he has made such an impact, but he's also, throughout the years, just people love the guy, and they respect him, and they love his ability to tell a story and what he does.
Yeah, you're right. And, I'm with you. I talk to a lot of people in the media, and I still talk to a lot of people in the sports media, and I listen to a lot of games on the radio, on TV, and I don't think a lot of people who follow Marshall sports don't realize just how good Steve is. I mean, we all love him, and it's because he does Marshall games, but above that, he is the consummate professional. I mean, I'm not just saying this, I've told him this before personally. I don't think you can find a better play-by-play guy in the country today. And that's the truth. I mean, I think he is amazing at what he does.
Now, Steve has called Marshall games for a long time, and that in itself is probably worthy of being recognized, but there's a lot that goes with that. And you look at his accomplishments on and off the air. And when you talk about a trophy case, Steve, thankfully, is very skilled with wood, because I'm sure he's had to put together a huge trophy case for all the accolades that's come his way over the years.
Right. Yeah, he is a fantastic whittler on top of all that. But, yeah, like you said, he's starting his 26th season as the radio voice of the Herd this year, his 29th season overall at Marshall. he was a 1995 graduate of our master's program. He has called 300 football games, more than 1,000 sports broadcasts for Marshall. I mean, he has done it all. And what I really like is there have been many times over the years that I'll be walking through the belly of the Henderson Center and I'll walk by his office, and almost every time Steve is sitting there at his desk, he's preparing for the next game or cutting some audio for that Saturday's game. He's always working. He's always preparing, and that's what makes him so good at what he does. It sounds effortless, but he's put in a ton of work before that football broadcast or that basketball broadcast.
I'm actually envious of all the prep time that he's able to put in, because
Yeah.
I mean, it's a blessing to have the time to be able to work on your craft, and he definitely has a lot on his plate, but he always makes sure that he's well prepared for a broadcast, because he's our lifeline. Sometimes the only voice between us and the Thundering Herd is Steve Cotton. He's it. He's the one telling us.
Yeah.
He's our eyes and our ears, and he's telling us everything that's going on. But you listen to Steve, and he's not your typical announcer. Yes, he's for the Herd, but we listen to broadcasts across our careers all over the radio dial, and there are a lot of people who are able to still be pro their university and call a fair, objectionable game, I guess. But there are some broadcasters who are out there that they're French. It's all we. Not Steve. Steve is a professional beginning to end. He's the Marshall announcer, but you listen to his broadcast, it's going to be top notch. He knows everything he needs to know about both teams, and he's not just calling the action with the Herd slant. He's the Marshall announcer, but you get the complete picture, and I think that's a rare gift these days.
It is very rare, and it's as you said, it's more and more rare these days, and that's probably part of the reason he's won that National Sports Media Association West Virginia Sportscaster of the Year 14 times now, which is more than anyone else in the state ever has. He's just his work ethic is just second to none, from what I can tell.
Chris Dickerson's joining us. He is the president of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication Alumni Advisory Board, and the nomination process for the Hall of Fame goes through his committee. Steve Cotton is announced today as one of the new inductees, and the other inductee, I got to be careful what I say here, Chris, because he signs my paycheck, is right. Mike Kirtner, the president of Kindred Communications. I'm going to let you tell the story of Mike Kirtner, because again, he signs my paycheck. I got to be careful here. I don't want to. Well, I don't want to say anything wrong, because
Yeah, and you can fill in because you know him better than I do, because he signs your paycheck. Actually, he used to sign mine too when I wrote for Herd Insider a little bit. But he graduated from the School of Journalism in 1973, and he moved around. Did some DJ work here, and then went to a few other places. And before he came back to Huntington in 1992 and created Kindred Communications, and they had 2 radio stations in, and now, if I'm right, they're up to 6 radio stations, right, as well as Kindred Digital.
Yeah, we have several distinct formats, multiple transmitters, 6 different formats. Kindred Digital, you hit it there. We have print, we have digital. Live performances, you name it, we do it. Yeah, sponsoring,
like that, the live concerts this weekend and all through the summer. Kindred Communications is known in the tri-state because of Mike's work. It's a business, but he's also part of the community, and that's part of why he has succeeded over the years. And he also does PA work for the basketball team on a volunteer basis, and other things for the school. He was given the Distinguished Service to Marshall University Award in 2019. He's already a member of the West Virginia Broadcasting Hall of Fame. He's a member of the Huntington Hall of Fame, whatever that thing is down at the Civic Arena. He has built a fantastic business in Huntington, and and as you know, it serves local people. It's all local DJs for the most part, and he loves Huntington. He loves Marshall University, and it's what he's done is just phenomenal, and certainly deserving of recognition.
I don't know how many more Hall of Fames we can put him in. We've run out, it seems, Chris. I don't know if there's anything else we've missed, but you're right. He's got the resume that, you look at what a local broadcaster does. He is what a local broadcaster does, and of course, I think the accolades just follow. But he's been doing it and keeping it local in a time and age when that doesn't happen very often anymore. There's really not that much local radio happening. Maybe in the smaller markets, but in a market the size of Huntington, it's still very rare. And of course, I work for the guy, so anything I say might be disingenuous. That's why I want you to speak more, because honestly, he's done it all, he's seen it all, and he's still doing it today. So he's deserving of everything he gets. But I work for the guy, so that's why I want you to lay the foundation for me.
Well, I think we've hit on a lot of it, that love of Huntington and of West Virginia and of Marshall University and the city of Huntington. It's just, that's why he has been successful. It's evident when you talk to Mike that he loves what he does and he loves the community, and it just shines through when you talk to him. When you listen to the radio stations, they're proudly local, and he does whatever he can for community. Like I said, he volunteers and does the play-by-play in the Henderson Center for the Marshall men's basketball team, and I think he does stuff for the Marching Thunder too, if I'm not mistaken. When they have band competitions and things like that, he's the announcer. So he just loves the community, and he's always, except for the few years when he was out moving around in the radio world, he's always lived right here in southern West Virginia, and he wants to make it a better place, and he succeeded in doing so.
Joining me on the program, Chris Dickerson. His title for today's purposes, the president of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication Alumni Advisory Board. Now, who gets in on this thing? Because I was having this conversation earlier. Me and another fellow broadcaster, me and Jason Toy, we're not as illustrious as Mike Kirtner. So we get it, but we're not say that. We're not as illustrious as Mike. Come on, look, it's all about Mike this week, okay, Chris?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it's all about Mike. And in all seriousness, here we'll tease Mike later. You just don't pick names from a random hat here. There's a criteria here to get in,
exactly.
And this isn't just, hey, yeah, that sounds like a good name. Let's go ahead and put them in. You have to reach a certain threshold to be even considered, and it's not a hard threshold to reach, but it's still a more an exclusive club, sort of to give the honor actually some meaning here. And what is that threshold?
There are two requirements. You have to meet at least one of them, and the first is you have to be a graduate of the Journalism and Mass Communications program and have contributed to journalism and mass communications as a profession. That means making a positive impact on the profession, or a contribution to Marshall University's School of Journalism and Mass Communication through talent, treasure, or activity. That means, for example, one of the inductees from 2020 is Dan Hollis, as a professor, and he's been there for decades. He's fantastic at what he does. He's one of the best professors on campus. He is adored by all his students. But he didn't go to Marshall, but he has given his talent to the School of Journalism, so that made him worthy of being in the Hall of Fame. All 5 of this year's inductees are actually graduates. Steve is a graduate of a master's program. He actually went to the University of Florida and got his undergrad degree before he came up to Marshall in 1995, I think, and started working as the second guy behind another guy named Stan Cotton, not related, actually spelled differently, but Stan Cotton was the old play-by-play guy when Steve first came to Marshall, and then he took over a few years later. But that's the two qualifications. Now, like you said, you have to really stand out because Marshall University School of Journalism and Mass Communications has been such a good program for so many years that we have so many worthy graduates who could, I'm not going to talk about it because it's not public, but there's 20 other people that have been nominated that they're easily worthy of the Hall of Fame. They've just not, we're not going to put 30 people in just to put them in. We want to make sure that people are very deserving, and it's a prestigious an event. So we're not going to just throw everyone in there. The people who are in there are deserving, and they've done significant and important things in their careers. So it's not just a popularity contest, like you said.
Yeah, because there are a lot of people who could get in. There are a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
That have gone through that program because it's such a good program, and I don't think people locally maybe realize. And that's part of the reason why you're here today and why this has started back up is, if you're in our profession, there's few schools that have standout programs that come to mind, like on the East Coast, Syracuse. Syracuse is well known for its broadcasting program, but Marshall's on par with them. Marshall's on their level. Maybe Syracuse is the one, maybe not on the level of Marshall, but they have better PR, it seems, because you hear about their grads more. In our profession, this is to change that a little bit.
And they have, and like you said, it's broadcasting, and I think they really have a specialty in TV. So if you see the people on ESPN or on NBC News, and a lot of them might have went to Syracuse, and that's just stuff people inside the industry know, of course. But Marshall's journalism program has always been top notch, and we're really lucky in this area. Students who want to go to journalism school, they have Marshall to choose from. WVU has a very good journalism program too. Kentucky has a very good journalism program, but that's the thing. You mentioned Syracuse and WVU and Kentucky and a few others, and Marshall's right there with them. Marshall has always had that program for as long as I've been alive. I had a choice when I was graduating high school back in the 80s, and I was looking at journalism, and I considered going to Kentucky, but I thought, why travel 2.5 hours down the road when I've got a fantastic school right here in my backyard? And that's why I stayed at Marshall. It's as good as it gets in the United States in terms of journalism.
And I don't think a lot of people realize this, but the student broadcasting portion is top flight. For example, Marshall students have the opportunity to cover all sports. Just using that, being a little myopic here, just keeping it in our realm. But some universities, they don't have the opportunities. And Marshall students can call football games. Marshall students can call basketball, and Marshall students can call bowl games, championship games. Marshall has so many opportunities, and we're not even talking about the journalism aspect of the broadcasting portion. Again, I'm a little myopic, Chris, and you know why. That was the path I took. But Marshall students compete with commercial radio stations, and on a national stage, we have seen Marshall be competitive in television and print as well. But this is a university that has competed with national entities and won national awards across the spectrum.
Yeah, and and on that front, especially the radio program, the radio department of the school is just, Dr. Bailey has always been fantastic about giving those students that chance and that opportunity, and they learn, and they're just as good as a lot of the the professionals, and it shows. And I don't think people around here realize how lucky we are to have had this program here, and whether it's to the newspapers or to television or to radio, how many graduates of the Marshall School of Journalism and Mass Communications at least start here. They might not stay here, but a lot of them do stay here. And we have an excellent foundation for journalism here in the tri-state because of Marshall University.
Chris Dickerson's joining me. Of course, you know him from his work years with the Herald-Dispatch and other journalistic entities. He is the president of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication Alumni Advisory Board. Mike Kirtner, president of Kindred Communications, and Steve Cotton, the longtime radio announcer for the Thundering Herd, part of the class inducted today. The ceremony will be held later on this year, but it's always good to see those with sports backgrounds, especially get in, because you have a lot of people to choose from, and I'm sure you could put in probably another 5-10 people in a year on average. But
yeah, absolutely.
You keep how many? Is there a restriction on how many you can induct? I mean, is that part of it?
No, there's not. And I think we kind of got off on a tangent, but after people, what we do is every January, February, we put out a call for nominations. Now, you can nominate people at any time of the year, but we put out this call early in the year, and then people submit recommendations. And it's a lot of our alumni who submit these names to us with a little, not just we nominate Steve Cotton. Tell us why you're nominating Steve Cotton, and we have a deadline, and we set. After they all come in, we sit down and we look at all these nominees. We debate them. This alumni advisory board, and there's about 15 or so people on it right now. We usually have the way the process usually works is we have a vote, and of all the people who are nominated, and then if we need to, we have a second vote narrowing it after we've narrowed the list of everyone down to. And there's no set limit, but it's like 12 to 15 people. And then we have another vote and pick from those people. And we don't have a set limit. Most of the years since we started this, we've inducted 5, but it's not like we're setting that. We're not saying we're going to induct 5. If there's usually the best way to describe it is there is a clear place in the voting. Like, let's just say someone will have 3 or 4 people get 10 votes, and 2 people get 9 votes, and then the next person gets 4 votes. There's a clear cutoff. That's the way we've had to do it. That's the way we've done it so far. We're not going to, as you said, not going to put 10 or 15 people in every year. I would think most years we'd put 2 to 5 people in. But so far it's been 4 or 5 people every year.
Chris Dickerson, my guest. You know what happens. You and I get together. We talk about everything, but we got a lot to get into usually, Chris. That's the good thing about us.
Yeah, I can talk about anything. You know that.
That's a good. That's a good thing to have.
These other 3 people, though.
Yeah, you know what we should.
Briefly.
We should, because I don't want to overlook them, because you mentioned Jack Hooveris, and I kind of joked with someone earlier. It's not Huntington Quarterly. Sometimes it's Herd Quarterly, because so many of the iconic pictures of the 90s you see floating around the internet of Chad Pennington and Randy Moss come from Herd. See, there we go. I did it again. Huntington Quarterly here, back when Marshall was making championship runs.
Yeah, and he started Huntington. I think actually 32 years ago today, or this week, is when he started Huntington Quarterly, HQ Publishing, which puts out that Huntington Quarterly magazine, and now he's putting out, 7 or 8 different magazines, including the Marshall magazine that goes out to alums. And he does the stuff, law magazines and medical magazines for the medical field and law field. But he has established a John H. Hoover Scholarship for SOJMC students. He's very active with Special Olympics and Little Victories Animal Rescue. He's a graduate of Leadership West Virginia. He's been honored as an entrepreneur by the Small Business Administration and the Herald-Dispatch. And he's also one of those guys who loves his community, loves Marshall, loves West Virginia, and does what he can to help out the community. And it's, you go to these all these big cities, and they have a magazine, a Houstonian magazine or a Sarasota magazine, St. Louis magazine, and we have Huntington Quarterly. And I don't think people realize just how good that magazine is. And, it's the stuff that it's not the hard hitting news because, the magazine cycle, I think it's 6 editions a year. So it's every 2 months, but he's telling these stories and he has a stable of great writers and they tell these stories that there's not time to tell on TV or even on radio sometimes, or certainly not in a newspaper. But it's these in-depth looks at people and trends, and he does, as you said, he's done a lot of stuff with martial athletics because martial athletics are so important to Huntington that it's a big focus. But he also will have do a feature on a very interesting home or a garden over on the south side. It's a great way. It helps make the community special. And Jack, it just like with Mike and how he loves the community, it shines through with Jack and everything that he does with HQ Publishing.
Yeah, while we have a few minutes, let's talk a little bit about Virginia's Sherlock and Brett Cunningham, why they're included.
Yeah, now Brent, he graduated from the school in 1988, and right after that I think he went straight to the Charleston Daily Mail and was a political reporter, done fantastic work there. And then since he moved on, he's written for the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, USA Today, The Nation, Pacific Standard, Fox, CNN.com. He spent 15 years as a media critic while serving as managing editor of the Columbia Journalism Review, which, it's one of those very prestigious things in the journalism community. He now is the executive editor of the Food and Environment Reporting Network. I've known Brent since college, and he's just a fantastic guy. Very humble. He just gets it, and he's really good at what he does, and he's been good at it everywhere he's went in his entire career. He's certainly a bright spot in journalism because he does it right.
Chris Dickerson joining me. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, Chris.
No, I was just going to talk about Virginia Sherlock.
We definitely need to talk about her.
Yeah, we talked about her a little bit, but she's a 1970 grad of the School of Journalism, and she was already a seasoned reporter when she became the desk supervisor at the Associated Press in New York, less than 4 years after she graduated from Marshall. And like I said, that feat is even more impressive when you realize that most female journalists then wrote for the society pages. She played a key role in updating the AP style book during her time there, including changes to how women were referenced in stories. Like, for example, when people read news stories now, for those of you all out there that might not even pay attention to it, if you read a story about LeBron James, they just refer to him as James after on second references. Well, when she first started the AP, a second reference to a woman would say Miss or Mrs. James. And she said, why don't we refer to the women the same way we refer to the men? And she fought hard for that change, and they eventually came to see her side of it. So, she was fighting for women's rights, 50 years ago. And after her journalism career, she went and obtained a real estate license and eventually a law degree. And now she's a partner in the environmental firm of an environmental firm in Florida. She also happens to be the daughter of W. Page Pitt, who founded the School of Journalism. And that has nothing to do with why she was inducted, though. What she did as a journalist stands on its own. She was also a teacher. I think, as a matter of fact, she might have taught Mike Kirtner journalism when she first got out of the School of Journalism.
So we might have to have words with her.
Yeah, exactly.
We need to have words with her. All I need to know is where she stands on the Oxford comma. That's it. That's all I need to know from her.
Well, she's AP. She's against it, So, but I don't know if she's changed now that she's an attorney because they like to write. So,
I'm a fan of the Oxford comma myself.
Well, okay, whatever.
See, there you go. Bone of contention to pick here.
I used to actually have to typeset stuff. That's how long I've been in newspapers. So I I don't want to deal with an extra comma unless I have to.
Chris Dickerson joining us. A little bit of inside baseball for some of these things, but we'll have our discussions about the Oxford comma on another day. Ceremony's coming up tentatively in October. Of course, when we get closer to the ceremony, we'll probably try to have these guys back on along with you sooner than later to talk a little bit about their careers. But Chris Dickerson, go ahead, sir.
Something really neat this year is because we didn't get to have a ceremony last year because of COVID. The 5 inductees from the 2020 class are also going to be honored at the event this year. So we're really excited about that. It's also going to be daunting trying to honor 10 people in one evening, but we're going to make limit speeches and tell people like Mike and Steve Cotton that they can't talk much. Steve won't be able to talk much anyway because there'll be a football game the next day.
Right. Steve will limit himself.
Save his voice.
Yeah, he'll pace himself. You're going to have to get Mike to cut his speech down, and you'll probably have to get the president of the Chamber of Commerce, Bill Bissett, to cut his speech down a little bit.
Well, our plan is, and we have tentatively planned to have Spencer Atkins as our MC.
Okay.
And
pull the hook if you need to.
What I'm going to suggest is that after a set time, say 7 or 8 minutes, if you haven't finished your speech, I'm going to give another microphone to Spencer, and he's just going to start explaining meteorological terms in great detail.
I like the plan. I like the plan.
We'll see how it works. So.
Chris Dickerson joins me. Hey, man, thanks for doing this. Appreciate it. Congratulations to everyone who has been honored today, including Steve Cotton and Mike Kirtner. They have contributed to the sports world immensely, and look forward to the next ceremony here coming up soon to honor everyone who's involved.
I appreciate you helping me get the word out. We'll talk soon.
That's Chris Dickerson. We got to hit a break, come back. We will wrap this one up here on ESPN 94.1 at AM 930.
This is The Drive with Paul Swann on ESPN 94.1 FM and AM 930.
I have run us out of time. We are done for the day. Thanks to Chris Dickerson joining me. You've seen Chris's work for years in media, including covering Marshall and other sporting activities for the Herald-Dispatch. He's currently the president of the School of Journalism and Mass Communication Alumni Advisory Board. Appreciate him coming up and telling us about the new inductees. We focused a little bit on Mike Kirtner, who, of course, is the president of Kindred Communications, our parent company here, and, of course, the voice of the Thundering Herd, Steve Cotton, both deserving of the honors they received today. We congratulate them and all the other names mentioned. That's going to do it for this edition. Thanks for tuning in. Back tomorrow. We'll try to be as worthy as those two gentlemen and then some tomorrow here on ESPN 94.1 at AM 930.
WRBC Huntington, W231BS Huntington, broadcasting from the Oscars Breakfast Burgers and Brew Studios. This is ESPN 94.1 at AM 930.